Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome all present and the viewing and listening public to this 22nd meeting of the Committee on Land and Physical Infrastructure. I'd like to advise that this meeting is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM, and is being streamed on the Parliament's YouTube channel, Palview. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Dirup Timal, and I'm the chairman of this Joint Select Committee on Land and Physical Infrastructure. And I'd like to invite members of the committee to introduce yourselves. First, we'll go with those who are physically present, and then we do those who are online.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. Lisa Morris-Julian, Vice Chairman.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Secretariat, Representatives. Simon de Nobrega, Member.
Our online members.
Good afternoon, Chair and other all present. Dr. Ibrahim, Member.
Good afternoon, Chair. Anil Roberts, Member.
Thank you, Member Roberts.
Good afternoon, Chair, and everyone present. Kennedy Richards, Member.
Good afternoon, everyone. Barry Padarat, Member.
Okay, thank you very much, members. The purpose of this meeting is to commence the committee's fourth public hearing pursuant to our inquiry into the various measures in place to address the challenges of climate change in Trinidad and Tobago. Today we have officials from the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, the Tobago House of Assembly, Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development, the IAMovement, and the University of the West Indies. Just to remind everyone that the objectives of this inquiry are to assess the impact of climate change in Trinidad and Tobago, to understand the challenges faced in treating with climate change, and third, to examine the effectiveness of measures being taken to mitigate the impact of climate change. I would now like to ask for the respective entities who are present here with us to introduce themselves. First, what I would like to do is to ask for the chief official present for each respective entity to introduce themselves, give us brief opening remarks, and then have your members introduce themselves, or you introduce them accordingly. So we'll start with the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government.
Hi, good afternoon, Chairman, members. I'm Peter Mitchell, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government. I'm here along with Mr. Jerry David, our Senior Disaster Management Coordinator. Mr. Chairman, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government functions as the coordinating agency which guides municipal corporations and special purpose enterprises under its purview in assisting communities by pooling resources in targeted areas, which include, among others, infrastructure development, disaster management, public health and sanitation. The ministry is committed to facilitating, coordinating, monitoring, and ensuring the accountability of municipal corporations in the effective and efficient delivery of quality services through meaningful decentralized systems, structures, procedures, practices, and the provision of specialized support services. In the area of disaster management, our disaster management unit is mandated to facilitate and maintain a robust disaster risk reduction capability at the local government level through the provision of expert disaster risk reduction advice to the administration of municipal corporations, as well as to collaborate with other first responders in providing local level assistance to citizens impacted by standards. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mitchell. We go now to the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the panel, along with the other members who are present here today. I am Penelope Bradshaw-Niles, Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. In terms of my opening remarks, the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries is pursuing a sustainable energy agenda aimed to assist in the achievement of our Vision 2030 goals and successful implementation of our nationally determined contributions. That is, reduction of our greenhouse emissions towards achieving a balance between the environment and social and economic development, while ensuring that citizens of Trinidad and Tobago are provided with affordable and secure energy supplies. In this regard, we are actively pursuing comprehensive, cross-cutting policy measures with future accompanying regulatory frameworks with the goal of decarbonizing our existing energy systems. To this end, we have instituted a suite of measures which include establishment of a solar PV power generating plant supplying 112.2 megawatts to the national grid, development of a framework for the hydrogen economy, which will guide the transition towards a green hydrogen economy, pursuit of carbon capture, sequestration, and utilization activities, such as the establishment of a carbon capture and CO2 EOR steering committee to manage the implementation of a large-scale carbon capture project, and also the preparation of carbon capture utilization and storage guidelines to operators who are willing to enter into CO2 injection project. So we are very happy to be here, and we look forward to discussing these ideas and activities more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bradshaw-Niles. Before we move on, could I ask the rest of your team to introduce themselves?
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Mark Rudder. I'm the Petroleum Operations Director at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Christian Welsh. I'm the Senior Petroleum Engineer in the Resource Management Division at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair. My name is Craig Budu. I'm the Senior Energy Analyst acting in the Renewable Energy Division.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Sheena Gosain, Sustainable Energy Analyst at the Ministry of Energy and Industries.
Okay, thank you very much. We move now to the Tobago House of Assembly Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon to the members of the committee. I am Armand Jackson, the Administrator for the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development, known by the acronym DIQD. The division appreciates the opportunity to contribute to this inquiry into the various measures in place to address the challenges of climate change in Trinidad and Tobago. DIQD manages the policy and planning for the sustainable development of Tobago's infrastructure network. Its focus is to ensure the delivery of infrastructure and systems that are safe, robust, intelligently designed, and environmentally sensitive. I would like to add that the DIQD supports the Division of Food Security, Natural Resources, the Environment and Sustainable Development, which has now the responsibility for the preservation and sustainable management of the island's natural resources, as well as environmental management. Our role is integral to the protection of the physical environment, but we do realize that the response to the effects of climate change and the protection of the environment involves multiple entities and stakeholders and is extremely important to small island states such as ours. As such, we welcome the recent initiative with the United Nations Development Programme on the sargassum seaweed invasion. Such collaboration will be richer for the discussions today, and we look forward to other collaboration and the recommendation from the committee and this meeting. I thank you, and I turn to my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Hi, good evening, Chair. My name is Atiba Martin. I'm the manager of the Engineering Design Unit at the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development.
I am, good afternoon, Chair, and the other persons involved. This is Dr. Ellis Boris, advisor, technical and engineering advisor in the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries, and Urban Development.
Good afternoon, Chair, and to all members. I am Dinah Adams. I am the project engineer in the Coastal Zone Management Unit under this division.
Okay, thank you very much, DIQD. We go to the IAM movement. Do I have it correct? Is it the IAM movement or IAM movement?
Yes, IAM movement. Thank you. So good afternoon, Chair and members. My name is Jonathan Barker. I am the Technical Director and Chairman of IAM Movement. We have other colleagues on the call who I'll introduce briefly after and allow them to introduce themselves briefly if needed. So IAM Movement is an organization. It was initially youth-led, all initially formed by young persons under the age of 20 at the time. I'm happy to say, well, the reality is some of us have passed that now and we've also grown in other ways, but it certainly was youth-led with a very strong feeling and sense just that Trinidad and Tobago needed positive social and environmental change. So the mission of the organization is to facilitate an enlightened and empowered relationship between people and environment. And I just want to emphasize that a little bit because really and truly in all of our work, while it's been very strongly environment and climate related, people have been absolutely at the heart of it and our need to work with people on all levels. That has been both in advocacy, where we've done certain activities such as climate marches at the time of the key UN summits in New York and Paris, which were very well attended by public, but also with key partners such as European Union, various embassies, as well as ministry sort of support, endorsement, that sort of thing. We've continued to strive to work with the government, and I've worked with Ministry of Energy on certain climate advocacy initiatives. And but along with that, which is sort of climate and advocacy related, and there's a particular project I'll mention at the end, just because it is quite related to this. We've also done quite a significant amount of work specifically with nature-based solutions, which I know is a part of this particular hearing. And so just to speak briefly to that, just to run through quickly the projects that we have done and are doing. There is one called MEEI Green and Education and Empowerment Program related to climate change adaptation, which is supported by the Ministry of Planning and Development's Green Fund. It's a nationwide program which makes use of vetiver grass as a climate resilient solution. And another project building on vetiver supported by the IDB Lab was similar, but had a lot of case studies involved. We worked closely with the Coastal Protection Unit, Drainage Division, and other partners. Also strengthening coastal marine and climate resilience through coastal ecosystem-based adaptation and community engagement. Similarly, nature-based solutions, but that was on Trinidad and Tobago, but also Antigua, Dominica, and St. Lucia. And then in conclusion, the IWECO project, which is very much focused on the rehabilitation of quarries. And with that now, was a successful initiative with the Environmental Management Authority and National Quarries Company Limited, which have all been incredibly supportive of this, but where IAM Movement has served really as the technical implementing partner working with communities. And with that, we have sort of moved into a phase of trying to make that sustainable, because of course, these projects do have end dates. And so we've now developed some models which are private and public in nature, trying to work with SwimCall and others, but looking at means to support the ongoing, so to speak, ecosystem-based adaptation and nature-based solutions, such as the transfer of organic waste to quarries and composting and that kind of thing in a circular economy approach. So that's kind of broad, and just mention again that we're doing a project called Advancing Climate Democracy in Guyana, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago, which just aims to sort of support some of these policy efforts. And I believe it's for that reason, that we've also found ourselves here with you today. So thank you again, everybody, and Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Bakant. Are there other members on your team who can introduce themselves?
Sure, I'll perhaps invite them to do that, yes.
Sure, no problem. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Jonathan. So my name is Kalapath-Maharaj, Managing Director for IAMovement. Pass it along to Kathleen or Casey.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, everyone. My name is Kathleen Manusturzi, and I'm a project manager at IAMovement handling the climate democracy project that Jonathan just mentioned in the last part of his presentation.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair members and colleagues. My name is Casey Gordon, and I am the M&E Specialist, Monitoring and Evaluation Specialist at IAMovement.
Okay, thank you very much, members of the IAMovement team. So I think, yes, we all know each other now, and we'll get into the questioning by members of the committee and the ensuing discussion. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, I have forgotten our persons at the University of the West Indies. So my apologies, because they have been with us for all of the sittings that we have had thus far, the three that have gone by, and they are joining us on the 4th. So I hand over to the University of the West Indies for introduction and brief opening remarks.
Thanks, Chair. Unfortunately, I was asked to convey apologies for Prof. Maiku. She can't make it today, so I'll be deputizing by giving the opening remarks on behalf of UE. As everybody here would be familiar with the university, we support multiple state agencies as well as developmental agencies and NGOs in work that is related to different aspects of climate change. We hope to continue to do so, and it has been a very nice experience to hear what the various agencies are doing and to see where we could contribute as a university. On a personal level, in terms of the university, we have developed a new program, which is probably one of the first in the region. It is the first. It's called a 1UE course or program that speaks to climate change. And it has different tracks. So you could do climate change and health, climate change and the environment, climate change and agriculture. And it is something that was pioneered by our principal at UE St. Augustine, and will cover courses from all the different campuses. So that is our way of addressing climate change from a capacity building arm. We also developed a new undergraduate major in disaster risk resilience, agriculture and the environment, and something that we're hoping that we can build capacity from a younger age so that persons who get involved in managing these disasters and so on and natural hazards going forward have the capacity to do so. Many of us would realize that persons who currently hold portfolios would have probably been trained in, environmental management and not directly in climate change, as well as disaster risk resilience. So that is some of the activities that we are engaging in as we go forward. So it's a pleasure to be here. And I also want to acknowledge the presence of two colleagues of mine from the university, Dr. Farrell and Dr. Clark, who I can pass over for them to introduce themselves now.
Okay, I'm Aidan Farrell here at the University of the West Indies. So I have a particular interest in climate adaptation in agricultural systems, but also protected areas, anywhere where the plants and wildlife are being impacted by climate change. Okay.
Hi, I am Ricardo Clark, Deputy Dean at the Faculty of Science and Technology, and my research interest is in climate assessment and impact and renewable energy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, University of the West Indies. So we get into the questioning and discussion. I would just like to remind everyone that to please direct your questions through the chair. Keep your microphones muted until recognized by the chair. And please utilize the raise hand feature should you want to contribute to the discussion. Please use this feature. The viewing and listening public, we are inviting you to submit questions via the Parliament's YouTube channel and social media platforms. We will try our best to include those questions to our stakeholders present here for their response. So I now open the floor to members of the committee to ask questions, and we are going to start off with Member Ibrahim.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, all. I would like to start off with the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. So a few questions I have to ask, and I'm so glad that the Permanent Secretary in her opening mentioned energy alternatives in lieu of climate change, one being solar-powered energy. However, as it applies to climate change and disaster preparedness, I would like to ask two particular questions. Firstly, and with reference to questions 1 to 15 submitted by a committee, is there any data on the impact of climate change on the energy sector of Trinidad and Tobago?
Do you have any data? Thank you. Thank you very much for that question. We don't have at this point in time within the Ministry of Energy collated data with respect to the impact of the energy sector. As you know, most of our energy, both oil and natural gas and the petrochemical products, are exported versus use of the population within Trinidad and Tobago. Most of the companies now are measuring what they call the Scope 3 emissions. And so in that respect, we have the companies themselves who are doing that kind of measurement. But in terms of overall collated at the Ministry of Energy, I don't have that data here at hand.
Okay. In relation to coordination amongst government entities, does your ministry have any challenges in relation to obtaining information from other governmental entities on projects such as renewable energy and energy efficient projects? And I would carry that question a little further. Do you have any challenges with these same government entities for the purpose of acquiring data on climate change that may affect the energy sector of Trinidad and Tobago?
So we actually have a very good relationship, and most of the government ministries work very well together. And I'll just give you examples in terms of that. So with respect to the actual responsibility for climate change, the Ministry of Planning and Development has that portfolio. However, the Ministry of Energy actually work together with that ministry and other ministries, such as the Ministry of Public Utilities, and committees which are associated with that, so that we can supply data to them in terms of their overarching role and responsibility in this area. However, there are other initiatives which are driven by the Ministry of Energy, where we collaborate with other ministries and other governmental agencies, and even the University of the West Indies and University of Trinidad and Tobago. And two examples of that: one, the same solar project which I spoke about, which is Project Lara, as we call it. We have a steering committee, which is chaired by the Ministry of Energy, but we have all the other governmental agencies which are instrumental in terms of the regulatory requirements as a part of that committee. And that committee has been working for the last year or two in terms of moving forward with that project. I also want to reference, we have the carbon capture and CO2 EOR committee, which I referenced, which has been established since 2021. On that committee, we have representatives from the Ministry of Planning and Development, as well as the University of the West Indies on that committee, together with some of the state agencies. In other areas as well, we collaborate with TNTech with respect to renewable energy. And also, so we have climate change, but within the energy sector, because of the areas, the things that we are doing to reduce the impact, are far-reaching into other areas. And therefore, we will have some of those plans and projects where we collaborate with the agencies. So it may not be necessarily tied to climate change, but what we are doing will have, we hope, a positive impact in terms of reduction of carbon or, a good impact in terms of the climate overall. Thanks.
Yes, the Ministry of Energy is definitely, Chair, if I may, it's definitely in a precarious scenario because, I mean, climate change is one of the drivers of climate change has been carbon emissions, and greenhouse gases and the greenhouse effect and so on. And as we know, the carbon footprint based upon our mainstay of our energy that we produce and we utilize definitely would impact upon climate. Delving into your solar PV systems, yeah. You see across the country. I mean, I think we read somewhere that you have about 12 sites currently. I would just like to ask what criteria was used to determine the selection of sites for the solar PV systems? And I ask that because, I mean, one of the most obvious ones that is available to the eye of the public would be one within the Piarco area. I believe that area was once a well-subscribed car park for the users of the airport authorities. And I see one there. So what was the criteria used for the selection of these 12 sites?
Okay, so I will just start with a brief explanation, and then I will ask Craig, who's the head of our RE division, just to go into some more information. So we have several different projects, which all of which would be at different levels, which would have different criteria. Some of it will be based on the fact that we have projects with funding from different agencies, which it would have been provided for a specific reason, and therefore the project would have arisen out of that. So we have at the utility level, which is the Project Lara, which are the 2 sites which will be in construction. Construction is starting on those. And those were based on a tender, right? So the sites were selected based on the bids that were received. We also have other projects. And for example, you reference the Piarco project, which is really a project that's done jointly. And so therefore that is a specific project. So the site would have been based on what goals we're trying to achieve. There's another project we have with respect to solar PV on specific schools, right? And playgrounds and so on. So we have different sets of projects, and the criteria for selection of the sites would be different based on what we are doing. So I will hand over now so that Mr. Boodoo can just walk you through some of the different projects that we have and how the sites for those are selected.
Yeah, hi, Chair. So the 12 sites that you referred to, I believe those would have been the schools and community centers that serve as emergency shelters. So we'd have looked at those and said, okay, in an emergency, these areas may not be connected to the grid anymore. So the plan was to install solar PV with battery storage. All of these things would have been tendered out as well by the National Energy Corporation, who serves as the implementation arm of the ministry. I'm not sure how much more details you would want.
Yeah.
Right, so we would have had these various stakeholders as well, including TNTech, Ministry of Public, Ministry of Education, who would have participated in the evaluation process, would have done site visits, would have engaged various engineering expertise to make sure that the facilities were capable of supporting the infrastructure. We would have engaged the communities as well, just to make sure that it was sometimes required as well for the areas.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm okay with the answers given.
All right, I understand, Mr. Bakant, you placed a comment on the chat, but if you want to ask anything in relation to what is being discussed right now, you can use the raise hand feature, and I would allow you into the conversation at appropriate times. Okay, and that goes for all who are present. You can utilize the raise hand feature, because so that we can include you in the discussion. Yeah, Member Ibrahim.
No, I was saying that I was pleased with the answer given of the consultation with the authorities as to what was the criteria for site consultation wise.
Okay.
I believe I made a mistake in my questioning. The area in the airport, I read it could have been used for car park. It was not car park space. It actually was grass space. So I was a little misleading in my questioning. If I may continue with another question, Chair?
Is it to the Ministry of Energy?
Yes.
Yeah, please. And then after, we would allow Mr. Bakan to make his input.
So I'll wrap up with this one. I mean, to the Ministry of Energy, your submission indicated with reference to development of a grid-connected solar PV carport and the installation of electric vehicle charging stations at the grandstand of Queen's Park, Savannah. The project manager, as quoted, the project manager, Clean Energy, is in finalizing and is in the process of evaluating bids, and is expected that the engineering, procurement, and construction contract will be awarded in the month of December 2022. I was asking the question, was the contract awarded for the engineering, procurement, and construction contract as scheduled? And if so, can you please indicate to the public what the entity that was awarded the contract? And if not, just provide a reason for the delay, if so.
Right, so the original tender was done last year, but because of COVID and the rising cost of shipping in particular, the other infrastructure, all the projects in the Caribbean were actually bundled together. So there were multiple projects, not just our project at the Queen's Park Savannah, but other projects at other islands. And instead of having one consultant or contractor, they decided to bundle it. And because of that, this has been causing more delays in the award, and no, the contract has not been awarded as yet. But the entire assessment is being done by the project manager, who is based in Master Clean Energy. So it's being awarded by the organization who's given out the grant.
Can you thanks for the question. Through you, Chair, can you please indicate just to wrap up this particular question? I realize that you said that basically nothing has been progressed, hoping to launch that in 2022, based upon the bundling of the equipment and so on. But just may I ask as a last part of this question, through the Chair, to indicate the cost of the engineering procurement and construction contract.
Yeah, Mr. Boodoo, would you be in a position to answer? Are you?
Yes, so the cost is a $3 million US grant.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Member. So we, Mr.
Chair, if I can just,
yes.
I just want to clarify, just for the member of the committee and the listening public, that this project we were a recipient of a grant facility under the UAE, which is United Arab Emirates Caribbean Renewable Energy Fund. And so therefore, the project, even though it's implemented here, so that's why Mr. Boodoo talked about other Caribbean islands and so on, because Mazda is actually a company out of the UAE who is doing like the project management for it. And so they are the ones doing the assessment in terms of the bids and so on. So while it's implemented here and while we are liaising with them, the project is really being managed by the Mazda, who is the implementing arm of this grant facility out of the UAE. So I just wanted to give that clarification, in terms of the project and it moving forward. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Mrs. Bradshaw-Niles, for that clarification. Mr. Bakan, you can ask or make your comments now.
Yeah, I have one short question which is related to renewable energy as well for the Ministry of Energy. And then I had another short question that was also for the Ministry of Energy. It's unrelated, but in the same climate change area. So I was wondering if I could ask that as well. But I will start with the renewable energy related one, and then you could let me know if I could proceed with the other one. Will that be okay? Yeah. So just with regards to renewable energy, I was wondering if any consideration, has been given to Tobago, specifically for the reason that, there was a study done once where Tobago, obviously Tobago has a much lower energy usage than Trinidad, given its smaller size and so on. And there was a study done that looked at the, let's say, costs. It was just a theoretical study, but to make Tobago 100% renewable. And that would have been at the time about $200 million US. Simply, and where this is based upon the average cost of renewable energy at the time being about $2 million US per megawatt, and the usage of Tobago being about 100 megawatts. So at the time, I think the study was done, the subsidy was also approximately $1 billion US a year for the country, the energy subsidy. I know that may have changed, but you can still see that the cost to making Tobago renewable is a fraction of that. And so the reason I just asked the question is that Tobago, as we know, we're moving towards a time when obviously we have to look post oil and gas, or just let's say other things coming into the mix. And with regards to tourism, obviously the world is very, very green oriented, And so I was just really wondering if consideration of some of these projects or any such projects for Tobago, while not only, of course, contributing to Tobago's grid, could also really, for want of better words, put Tobago on the map strongly along with the rest of the Caribbean as moving in a sustainable direction, and thereby actually serve all the other factors of visibility and awareness to boost greening of Tobago and tourism and that kind of thing. So it was really related to the consideration of Tobago as well within the renewable energy mix, this particular question.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And just to say that we believe that we are now we have started, on the road towards implementing renewable energy. And so that is what we consider the entire energy transition. And so therefore, as we build out our roadmap, and we've been working in terms of developing plans in terms of that. Of course, Tobago, both Trinidad and Tobago, but Tobago, of course, will be a focus in terms of that. But we still have some ways to go in terms of the actual implementation of renewable energy. But we are getting there. I just wanted to say that, in terms of the energy transition and climate change, that the fact that, Trinidad and Tobago has been using natural gas, we are almost 100% in terms of using natural gas for power generation, that has put us ahead, even though, we normally don't consider it, but that has put us ahead of the curve in terms of other countries which are, still have coal and, using other types of fuels for power generation. So we have begun that transition even decades ago, before we started talking a lot about it in terms of using natural gas. And so we are well on our way in terms of moving towards the cleanest sets of energy for power generation. But thank you very much for that. And it is, high on our agenda as to how we move forward after these projects that we're doing now.
Yeah. Thank you, Mrs. Bradshaw-Niles. Mr. Bakan, let's hear your other question, and I'll see whether we take it now or later in the proceedings. Yeah.
No problem. Yeah, as I mentioned, it was for the Ministry of Energy, but it is more on the nature-based sort of solution side and land regeneration sort of thing. And it was just pertaining to the 2015 Minerals Act, where I think, gratefully, that act included, which might have been long awaited, but the inclusion of the rehabilitation of quarries as being something that quarry operators have to do and have to allocate certain funds in the form of bonds and otherwise to rehabilitate even before approval and so on. Obviously, there's transitional periods, and I know that there's all types of things going on with the, let's say, permitting processes. But I don't believe, and to my knowledge, that it has been, as in, I'm not sure if that part of the act has actually been enforced and implemented as yet. Whereas, I think that Trinidad, under its land degradation neutrality sort of targets with Ministry of Planning and just the general country's goals and everything, has certainly put the rehabilitation of quarries high up. I think 100 hectares was sort of the target. So I was just wondering if, because I think that act is under the Ministry of, I suppose the Ministry of Energy would oversee it. So I was just wondering if the operationalization of that act is being considered with priority and that sort of thing, and what steps might be being made in that area.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. So it is operational. So what has happened is that for the licenses which have been given out since the act is in force, they have to put up the bonds. However, the process is, you have to be at a certain point in terms of having already quarried before the rehabilitation starts. So I think at the appropriate time, based on the act that we have now, the rehabilitation will be happening. So yes, it's already in force, and we do have that in place where, and we have the Minerals Advisory Committee, and the head of the EMA, is a member of that committee, along with the Commissioner of State Lands and, Director of Forestries and so on. And so part of the remit of the committee is really to ensure that the act is followed and it's implemented. And so, yes, it is in place. But however, at this point in time, the quarries, they're still quarrying. So the rehabilitation, wouldn't be happening right at this moment.
Yeah, that's very good feedback. PS, thank you so much, and Chair. And really and truly, because obviously we're active in there with the EMA and others. So it's really, really good to know. I was just wondering if, in light of that information, if there's any possibility of quote unquote posting or awareness, public awareness, transparency, or whatever, just with regards to, let's say, what has been committed by quarries. Obviously, it's locked up as a bond, But I think it just tells the sector, even though it's in the future, it just tells them that the act is operationalized, even if it's to come down the line. Whereas obviously in this particular space, there has been the questions of if it's operationalized. And I think that could really help people put that to rest and know, okay, those funds are there. And they could probably, through that, initiate discussions with the quarries and whoever to say, hey, we know you'll have those funds, we can help you with as the case may be, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Vakant. Yeah, Mrs. Bradshaw-Niles, before we move off and go to another entity, I'd just like to come to the utility scale renewable energy project, particularly that project with BP and these guys, where there's a planned injection of about 112 megawatts of solar generated electricity to come onto the national grid. Could you indicate where we are with this project, one, and two, because I think you had indicated in your response to us that it should be completed by the end of 2024, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it should be completed in 2024. So just an update on where we are with that project, and also what percentage would this 112 megawatts, what percentage does it constitute of the overall power generation needs of the TNTEC requirements?
Yeah.
Mrs. Bradshaw-Niles, you're muted.
Yes, thank you very much for that. So pleased to say that as we speak right now, there's the start turning of the project for the Project Lara in terms of the construction. And so for both, so there are two sites, Brechin Castle and at Orange Grove. And so therefore construction is beginning. All things are in place for the constructions to in terms of the construction for the project. So we are on target for it to be fully operationalized in 2024. In terms of the actual percentage, it would be 9% at peak demand in terms of the amount of power that's required for Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah, I hope you got my response.
Yeah, thank you very much. Member Padarat?
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, on the same line of questioning today, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, Madam PS, there's been much speculation with respect to the negotiations that took place between Shell, BP, and the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago in terms of the costing per kilowatt on this Lara project. Can you confirm to us what was the initial costing and what was the revised costing per kilowatt?
So I don't have that, sorry, Chair, just to respond. I don't have that information in front of me right now, but we'll be happy to supply it in writing to the committee, if you would allow, Chair.
Yes, we'll welcome
Chair,
it.
can I ask through you for the Secretariat to follow up with the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries for their written response on this?
Yeah,
issue,
sure.
please?
Yeah, sure, Member Padarat. We definitely would do that follow-up. Dr. Rupnarain?
Afternoon, Chair. Through you, I just have one question, a general question with respect to renewable energy and solar energy. And it has to do with the legislation. Currently, it's illegal for a private homeowner to install, etc. So I was wondering if there was any progress, because I know there was some talk in the media about some legislation being introduced, and how soon is this expected? Because part of subsidizing this entire thing has to be public uptake and getting persons to invest in it on a on a community level. So just wondering if there was any progress with that thus far, and if they could answer. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, Mrs. Bradshaw-Niles, I would extend it for it to encompass the whole issue of the feed-in tariff, and also to include also this utility scale project. Yeah, the feed-in tariff. What are the challenges where we are with it, and what are your major hurdles to overcome in future to get it into reality, including the need for legislation if necessary.
Yes, so thank you very much. So there is an interagency committee which is working on the feed-in tariff. And so we expect by the end of this year that we'll be able to go to cabinet, right, in terms of the recommendations of that committee. As you know, and I think as was mentioned, there's need for legislation to go into force. And of course, there's a process for that once the policy is done. So that's the timeline that we have currently in terms of the feed-in tariff. And once that is legislated, that will give the required permission so that you can have interconnection from, let us say, private households and so on, once there's excess power to go onto the grid.
The legislation, is it newer legislation, or is it amendments to the TNTEC Act, or is it a combination of both?
Yes, sure. It's a combination of both of them, because currently, as it is, the TNTEC Act does not allow, for other persons, for the sale of electricity. So it will be a combination of both.
Okay, thank you very much. Member Padarat, I see you have your hand up.
Certainly. Chair, through you to the PS and Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, in light of your assurance to provide the information with respect to the price per kilowatt in terms of the initial negotiations and what exists in terms of the agreement today, would the PS be kind enough to furnish us with what the initial agreement was in terms of the terms and conditions when the Lara project was first signed on with BP and Shell, and also a copy of what was renegotiated in terms of the terms and conditions, in terms of what applies for the renegotiations and the new rates?
Mrs. Bradshaw-Niles, you okay with that?
I would just like to ask the honorable member just to clarify, is it the agreement itself that you are asking for, or is it the terms? So if the committee could probably just write exactly what they would like, then we would look at what we can furnish.
Sure. Probably we will put it in writing, but for the edification of members and yourself right now, what I'm asking for is, when the project was first signed on with BP and Shell, there was an initial agreement in terms of the terms and conditions per kilowatt, together with numerous other aspects in terms of concessions. That is what I'm asking for in terms of the initial agreement. We were then told that the project was stymied for about 2 to 3 years, and that the ministry had to re-engage BP and Shell with respect to the new terms and conditions, which also indicated that there will be a new pricing with respect to the per kilowatt. So I'm asking for what would have applied initially when the first project RFP first went out and the negotiations were completed. And now I'm asking also for the second set of documents, which will be the terms and conditions, which includes the pricing per kilowatt, which have been renegotiated and which now applies to the current arrangement.
So thank you for that. So it explains it a lot better. But just to explain that we only have one set of agreements, which was signed, and I think it was subject to the public. The public would have been aware in December of last year that there were one set of agreements, one agreement which was signed since the start of the project, which is we had the implementation, the agreement, which was signed. So between the tender and now, there are not two sets of agreements, just one set of agreements which were signed. All right, but I understand your question, and we will be able to respond in writing, as much as we can. Right? So in terms of that.
Yeah, certainly, P.S. I just wanted to make the point that the minister, then in her capacity as acting Minister of Energy, answering a question in the Parliament, indicated to members that there was a renegotiation per kilowatt based on this project. And what I'm trying to really get at is whether or not there was an initial agreement for a price per kilowatt, and now what is the renegotiated price, whether it has remained the same at 4.62 US cents per kilowatt, or has it really moved on to 6.7 or another variable thereafter. That's what I'm trying to get at, based on the minister's answer in the Parliament.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm saying that there is a renegotiated price, but not a renegotiated agreement, which is what I think
the distinction you make.
Yeah, so I'm just letting you know that there's just one agreement which was signed.
Okay.
Certainly, madam. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bradshaw-Niles. So we'll move from the Ministry of Energy and Industries for the time being. Of course, we may come back, and we move on now to the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, and I'll ask Member Morris Julian to ask the questions.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Chairman, through you, the ministry's submission indicated there's a noticeable succession of mosquito-borne diseases such as dengue, chikungunya, Zika, and it's linked to temperature increases and changing rainfall patterns. Can the ministry please explain the role of the municipal corporations and how they interact with the Public Health Inspectorate in treating those mosquito-borne diseases, or in particular areas, because vacant lots will come to mind? And well, the Public Health Inspectorates, can I find out more about the relationship with the municipal corporation?
Hi, good afternoon, Chair. Through you. Yes, each municipal corporation, as you know, have a dedicated Public Health Inspectorate team. There is collaboration between the municipal corporation and the county medical officers of health under the Ministry of Health. With the pending proclamation of the Local Government Reform Act, the span of responsibility for the municipal corporation will expand a bit in terms of deciding policies and strategies for how to deal with any public health issues within their region. The ministry to whom responsibility for local government will retain the role from a certain amount of policy setting. So the relationship at the municipal level will be increased, and at the municipal level, they will have a greater collaboration with the Ministry of Health on that issue.
Sorry, Chair, through you again. Could you talk to us about the actual treatment? How is it executed currently? I ask because I personally think I have a mosquito field right next to me.
Right. In terms of the respective regional corporations, I don't have that detail with me right now, because each regional corporation will deal with certain issues pertaining to that corporation. As honorable member just said, you may have a complaint in that particular region. So what we will endeavor to do is to get back to that particular regional corporation to find out how they are treating with some of those issues there.
No, through you, Chairman, is it possible that we could just, through your ministry, find out how the 14 regional corporations will deal with that particular matter? For example, I'm aware for Borough, but I'm also aware TPRC has a different way of dealing with these particular matters. And this is definitely something linked to climate change. So I would assume, and I would hope through you, Chairman, that there is some policy that is shared throughout all regional corporations and boroughs and cities. And if possible, if we could get that in writing from the different public health departments in those different areas.
Right. Once we get the written notification from the Secretariat, we will liaise with the 14 regional corporations and we'll get back to you, because the ministry of itself, we don't have a central public health department at the ministry. So we rely on the 14 regional corporations to make that determination because they are closer to the ground. What we do at the ministry is if they need more resources, we will lobby for them to get more resources from the Ministry of Finance, or if they need for us to coordinate with other regional corporations to provide resources and support, we will do that. But we will endeavor to, once we get the written submission from the Secretariat, we will liaise with the 14 regional corporations and we'll get their responses.
Yeah, Mr. Mitchell, your response begs the question, in terms of, are you aware of any policies that are being utilized by the corporations?
Yes, we have. Yeah, we have some corporations, but in the context of this meeting, I don't have that information in front of me right now. But we know from a public health point of view that each corporation makes determination pertaining to any specific issues related to that corporation. But as I alluded to earlier, we endeavor to get the information from all the 14 regional corporations so that you have a view of what it is. But you must remember, public health is managed at two levels. You have the Ministry of Health, which determines public health at a national level through the Chief Medical Officer down to the County Medical Officer of Health. And the regional corporations deal with a level of insect vector and so forth. So what we will be able to give you is what the regional corporations are doing. And what is the national policy? I don't have that in front of me, but we can liaise with the Ministry of Health to get that for you. What we can give you is what the 14 regional corporations are doing to deal with what the honorable member alluded to earlier, which was the mosquito infestation.
Through you, Chairman, I'm not speaking about public health with regards to the Ministry of Health. I'm speaking specifically in connection to climate change, the impact of climate change on mosquitoes, on the mosquito breeding, the mosquito diseases, and how it impacts upon the regional corporations and how they are dealing and treating with mosquito-borne diseases. I mean, I even reached the rats, which is another issue with public health, local public health. But in particular with this, I would like to know what each corporation is doing towards this, because climate change is here. It's not going anywhere. And mosquito-borne diseases, it's happening because of the temperature increases, changing rainfall patterns, and all that. So that is the connection that I'm asking for on behalf of the committee. But Chairman, just to move on, I notice, well, it's a very interesting statement in the submission by the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government. And I quote, "There is also the belief of disaster mitigation being anti-development, as is the investing in preventative measures for disasters." Could you please elaborate on this statement?
I'll ask my colleague, Mr. David, to respond to you. But that's a very good question.
Can identify what the question is.
Could you repeat the question, member?
Response to question 2, Mr. David, on page 2.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Increased intensity, frequency, and uncertainty of disasters have restricted the abilities of governments, communities, and individuals to organize, plan, and apply resources as disaster occurs. I'm trying to pick where you, member, trying to pick where you are in the statement.
1 second, Mr. David. I will let the Secretariat.
Yes, please.
Because it's in your your
It's the last
submission.
line. It's the last line, right? There is also the belief of disaster mitigation.
Yes, sir.
Being anti-development, as is the investing in preventative measures for disasters.
Yes, Mr. David. As I stated before, question to page 2.
Yeah, I am. Chairman, as I look at this particular answer, mitigation being anti-development, not something I would speak to at all. The challenges, the question is asking, describe the challenges faced with disaster risk management, response, coordination, and recovery operations in relation to disaster caused by climate change. I would have to look at this answer again.
Yeah, please.
Look at this answer again.
Yeah, Mr. David, yeah, could you look back at that response that was made by your ministry, and could you send some clarification in writing to the committee?
Sorry.
As to what the member is asking.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you so much, Chairman. And Mr. David, I'm a little worried, but I still want to go on. Because I want to ask, from your perspective, is there resistance to disaster management planning in this country?
No, not at all. I think we have quite a robust body of stakeholders who are into disaster risk reduction, from not only the ODPM, who are and the different regional corporations. We have DEMA is always sending information and doing studies that will help us in the area of disaster risk reduction. And at the ministry, we are working at it not only at the ministry level, but at the ground level. And this is where I think the power of disaster risk reduction is at the ground level, when we can get into the communities. If we talk in climate change, it means we have to deal with informing the public as to what is happening to our communities, where we live, why is it happening? Why are we having these frequency of flooding every year? Why is the rainfall so intense? 30 years ago, there would have been rainfall as normal, but today we're getting so much pounding rain in such a short period of time. And where you live, it's important you know where you live and the impact of what is happening to you, so that we are working at that. Mitigation is not only, doesn't only require an engineering solution, it will require an eco solution in some cases. So we are in the community, a member, and that's why we have placed such an emphasis on creating now community hydrological observers, community emergency response team volunteers, all of this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. David. I don't know if you have reassured the member, but hand over to
Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. To the ministry, I would really like them to review their submission for that particular question, because there seems to be some sort of contradiction in what is being said and what was sent. And in order for greater clarification, if it could be submitted in writing, please, because I do have one question, one final question. Well, maybe not final. I reserve the right to come back, Chair. I know that Member Richards and Member Dana Berger in particular would also want to chime in. But The submission also indicated each disaster management unit is subjected to ongoing public and school awareness programs. And I think when Mr. David was speaking, he said there was a need, but I'm seeing that it is happening. In order to educate on disaster mitigation and simple disaster response strategies. In addition, they're tasked with carrying out various trainings, such as shelter management training and community emergency response training and shelter inspection training to volunteers whom solely urged to aid in disaster response and mitigation. Furthermore, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government communicates policies from the central government, which is critical for this ministry to advocate for the importance of disaster management. Now, I'm particularly interested in disaster management. And I would just like to know, what was the last school this school awareness program was run? I can't recall, but I do know quite a lot about the shelter management training, the CERT program, which are all excellent programs in my humble opinion, and everyone, if they can, they should do these programs. And if you could describe the monitoring mechanism to ensure that these tasks assigned are implemented. For example, if I become a certified operator, how do you confirm that I am coming back, that I'm actually participating in the program? And finally, how often are education and awareness drives conducted?
All right, before Mr. David answer that question, I just want to allude to you that even though we do public awareness programs, we can always do more. So I think what Mr. David was alluding to is that, yes, we are doing certain things and certain public outreach programs, but there's always room to improve and do more. Of course, it is depending on the resources of the ministry. In respect to the question in detail of the monitoring, I asked Mr. David to.
Okay, member, I'm glad you're asking about the schools. We just had a report done for over the period January to March. We had completed over 74 schools throughout Trinidad. Yes, 74 schools and primary schools and secondary schools, and we are bringing awareness to every aspect of disaster risk. You ask about how we monitor CERT volunteers. CERT volunteers are becoming an integral part of disaster response in municipal corporations. The training is done. We just completed training, member, 2 weeks ago in Cuba. As in the Cuba Talpa Regional Corporation at the Roystonia Community Center. We are now planning in the month of July, April, May, June, and July, CERT simulation exercises where we have divided the country into zones, and there are preliminary rounds where we are actually going to simulate a hurricane and have all the CERT volunteers working along with the regional corporation staff to bring, well, at this point, we are actually taking them through setting up an incident command post, setting up a medical treatment area, search and rescue techniques, psychological first aid. Those same elements of CERT training, we are going to bring it nationally. Preliminary rounds first in the zones, and then one final at one of the major stadiums. And this is about bringing them together, keeping them active. We have over 3,000 CERT volunteers in Trinidad right now. Shelter management, we probably have about 1,000 shelter managers. So we are keeping them engaged and active. And many a times we do this, member, without voluntarily. Many of you, if you come and see our CERT volunteers, all the uniforms they have and all the PPEs is not provided by the state. They do it themselves. And that is the spirit of volunteerism that we try to engender in community emergency response team. I hope that helps answer some of the questions, that part of the question.
Through you, Chairman, all very interesting information, but I still don't understand what is the monitoring mechanism. Do we wait for disaster to happen and then look to see who shows up? Do we, or do you, not we, do you, with refresher courses, ever so often you say, all right, we train 100 people and 60 people came back? That is what I am particularly interested in, because I would have done a cert course. And I think when we had a particular disaster, I did not see any of the faces that trained with me at the time. So I'm just asking, what is the, and I would love to do a refresher course, by the way. So when you're in the East, let me know, please.
I hear this question all the time, member. CERT is volunteerism. Volunteerism is as it is volunteerism. It cannot be mandatory at the same time. So the fact that CERT volunteers purchase their own equipment, yes, purchase their own equipment, their own PPEs, their own uniform, means that they are concerned and willing to work in their communities. Sometimes when you don't see CERT volunteers at a particular venue, it's because they are trained to first see about their homes first. They may be impacted. They are trained to see about their street, their community, and then you would find if CERT volunteers have to move out and go and help in another community, you will see them. That is important. The reason why we're doing this simulation games, member, is to bring them out, get them together, create the camaraderie, and all the skills that we taught them over all these years, you will see that bursting out on those days. So that apart from just the CERT volunteer program, remember, we can do the shelter management, we can do the incident command system, which is management system for managing disasters, community hydrological observers. We have that program, and we are engaging them in all of this just to keep them focused on the commitment they made to help the communities, to help their country. And just as you see, I am really enthusiastic about this, and my passion about it. It is for the people of Trinidad. I want to let you know, member, that Tobago has said that they will send their CERT volunteers over to Trinidad to compete in the, well, let's not call it compete, but to partake in this, this simulation exercise.
Thank you, Chairman. So what I got from all that is that this national CERT exercise is a good way to monitor the mechanisms to see that it's actually working. So when you have that, okay, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, before we move on with, we still have one or two things for the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, but I see Dr. Rupnarayan has his hand up, so we'll have his input and then we continue with the Ministry of Rural Development. Dr. Rupnarayan?
Thanks very much, Chair. Through you, I just was wondering, based on the question before that was posed to the ministry, right? I think perhaps what Mr. David was attempting to say was that investment into disaster mitigation is limited, whereas we manage crisis as opposed to risk. Perhaps he could clarify if that is what he was trying to say in that particular statement, because that's all I could try to get from it. And it's something that we talk about all the time. We have crisis management, a disaster happens, and then we deal with it. And we are trying, at least all persons who are involved in risk management, is trying to push the rhetoric in that direction, where you do something prior to it actually causing any sort of adverse effect. So maybe that is where I think they were trying to I guess, explain in that response. So I just wanted to offer that opinion to see if that is what he really meant. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So they would address that in their response that they would be giving to the committee in writing, as was indicated. So if you can take Dr. Ruknarayan's comments into consideration, if that is the direction you all were looking at, and include it accordingly. Yeah, Mr. Mitchell, in going through your response to the questions that were sent to the ministry by the Secretariat, there is almost a total emphasis on disaster management, understandably so, because of your clear mandate with regards to disaster management. But in terms of the overall ambit of climate change, and more on climate adaptation measures rather than mitigation measures, the committee is a bit concerned about some of the responses. As I said, you are focused a lot on disaster management. But like, for instance, in response to question 12, you have made the statement that climate change action is not provided for under the reformation of local government. And I think you may be referring to the recent local government reform, the amendments that were passed not too long ago. It puzzles me because with the additional mandate of local government, particularly with regards to planning approvals, regional planning, spatial planning, and the fact that you all also have to interact. A lot of the roads in the communities are not really the responsibility of the Ministry of Works. You have to deal with a lot of landslides. You have to deal with a lot of flooding situations. And yes, I understand the emphasis on disaster management, but these other aspects of the impact that climate change is having on citizens and infrastructure, that really falls under the ambit of your ministry. So I'd just like to get your views on that, because as I said, it seems to be sending the message that there are others seeing about that. And the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government role really there is limited, and they are just there to take instructions from central government, according to some of the wording of your responses. Mr. Mitchell, would you like to clarify?
Right, Mr. Chair, the first lines in that climate change action not provided for. If I refer you to the 13th schedule of the Miscellaneous Provision Local Government Reform Act, if you notice that climate change, the word climate change is not mentioned there. However, your point is taken, and to allay the fears of the committee, our role also includes mitigation strategies, as you alluded to, in terms of landslides and so forth. There's another aspect of the ministry that is being addressed as we speak now, and we are in collaboration with our colleagues in the Ministry of Planning and Development. That is spatial planning and the implementation of the National Spatial Development Strategy 2013 to 2023. You would know that what the new act calls for is for the creation of municipal planning authorities. When that act, that other act, which is the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act, is fully proclaimed, the National Planning Authority will be dealing with complex planning and complex development, and simple planning, simple development will be the purview of the municipal corporations. So in terms of dealing with how people build in particular areas, make sure don't build too close to the riverbed, which has been an issue in the past, that now falls under the municipal corporation. So I don't want the committee to feel that we are only thinking of disaster management, but we are going up in terms of in the new role of spatial planning. Each corporation will have a spatial planning and building inspectorate division, which the Act calls for. And it is there, if you look at the act in terms of section 35A, you will see the divisions that each municipal corporation should have, and among them is spatial planning and building inspectorate. So the other legislation that goes along with the local government reform legislation, which is the one that the Ministry of Planning is looking to operationalize now, will then devolve a lot of authority in terms of how we give approval. And with that approval, climate change adaptation strategies and how we mitigate against the effects of climate change will factor into how planning approvals will factor in going forward. So we are preparing for that. And I think that first line, we were responding to what the legislation in terms of the word climate change. But we in the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government is an important stakeholder in contributing in dealing with climate change. And we will deal with that through working with the municipal corporations, because we are looking to reestablish the local area development and regional planning unit here in the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, which will set standards and give advice to the new spatial planning divisions in the municipal corporations. So we are looking at climate change through those things. I mean, I think we all know that climate change, if we take it literally, is not the function of the Ministry of Rural Development, but we do understand that we have a role to play in mitigating against climate change and how do we prepare the country for that. So I hope that that overview I give will kind of satisfy the committee in terms of where the direction we are going.
All right, but in that direction that you're going, are you looking at dedicated resources for addressing climate change, or climate change unit within your ministry?
Yeah, and as I said, we're looking to reestablish the regional planning units, and I think some of the members may recall that this unit was established a while ago when we created municipal development plans in 2009. It went in abeyance, and we are looking to recreate that. You're right, Chairman, climate change will form part of the staffing structure, but we will not have climate change specialists at the municipal corporation. But in terms of how we're looking to staff the spatial planning divisions in the municipal corporations, right now we are looking in terms of the org structures of that division, together with all the other divisions that will be established by the Act. And that expertise and that knowledge will be present at the municipal corporation. But bear in mind, the core climate change policy is the remit of the Ministry of Planning and Development. But what we know, that everyone knows, that spatial planning is an important avenue by which we can deal with climate change. So what our role at the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government is to ensure that when we come up with those job descriptions and the structures which is subject to Cabinet's approval, we will ensure that that skill set is there at the municipal corporations, so that each municipal corporation will be able to have a structure, and those structure will be able to assist, because not all regional corporations is monolithic. They have specific issues, as you alluded to, Chair. Some have landslides, and of course, some of them are in the flood-prone areas. So that when we fully operationalize our Act, the Local Government Reform Act, and when the Ministry of Planning operationalize the Planning and Facilitation Development Act, those two pieces of legislation, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government is responsible of implementing at the municipal level.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mitchell. So we'll go now to Member De Nobrega, but before we do, could you just quickly answer if you have received any communication or indication as to when the Planning and Facilitation of Development Act would be operationalized or proclaimed?
Mr. Chairman, you're very fortuitous. We just had a meeting yesterday with the Ministry of Planning and Development in terms of the strategy going forward to operationalize their act, which is the Planning and Facilitation Development Act. And we will be continuing to be liaising with them in terms of that. But I would leave it up to the Ministry of Planning and Development to give you the schedule of proclamation of the remaining sections. I don't want to step into their remit, but we are having conversations with them. We had a very good meeting yesterday with the permanent secretaries and the deputy permanent secretaries. and of course with the existing town and country planning division and the chairman of the National Physical Planning Authority, and we are mapping out a strategy because they understand that we have to do things collaboratively. We have our proclamation schedule. They will have their proclamation schedule. So we have to work together because those two legislation, the Ministry of Rural Development, local government, will have some responsibility for. So we are working with them very closely on that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mitchell, for sharing that information with the committee. We go now to member Denobrega.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, through you to DPS Mitchell initially. DPS Mitchell, you spoke about the importance of spatial planning correctly. You spoke about what the new structure and the wide-ranging responsibilities of a reformed local government service would be. However, every municipal corporation, even though you are correct, they are not monolithic. Every municipal corporation should have, at least it's on the org chart, a building inspector and an engineer. You are correct in that these things do contribute to disasters that are also a result of climate change, the effects of climate change, higher levels of rainfall. Mr. David did speak about the difference between the type of rain and the amount of rain that we got from 30 years ago to now. But can you explain to me what mechanisms are in place at the corporations to properly enforce the existing building codes across the country? Of course, that would be at the municipal corporation level. And then what role does the ministry, from a guiding perspective, a line ministry perspective, do to ensure that these corporations are doing the job that they're supposed to do? Illegal structures, poor construction, etc., building too close to riverbanks or on water courses, ensuring that municipal corporations are fulfilling their existing mandate. And in addition to that, to ensure that under the current structure, that they are resourced in a way that they can do that.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Through you, Chair. We had a meeting of CEOs of all the regional corporations a few weeks ago, and this was one of the issues that was raised. We are endeavored at the center to work with the relevant service commission to fill some of the positions that are vacant at this point in time of building inspectors. And you're absolutely correct. The existing structures to enforce some of the corporations that have a challenge. And what we do at the ministry, we attempted to, for one regional corporation, we sought to get expertise from another regional corporation to assist them in a particular exercise because they do not have a building inspector on their establishment. Remember, building inspectors are public service positions. Well, public service positions for 10 regional corporations and the Statutory Authority Service Commission for 4 regional corporations. We have to manage 2 service commissions to deal with the 14 regional corporations. So we are doing the best we can in terms of the coordinating. As I said in my opening statement, we right now recognize that there are resources that some corporations need, and we try our best to supplement them by asking or even trying to get some corporations to assist. It has worked, but in terms of answering your questions directly, most of the corporations are short-staffed currently in the building inspectorate. Again, and I know members have been hearing this all the time in their other committees or in Parliament. The Ministry of Rural Development local government doesn't hire building inspectors. It's irrelevant to this commission. We continue to make representation to the respective service commissions to fill those building inspectors. And one of the things about the Local Government Reform Act, Honourable Member, when it is fully proclaimed, is that the corporations can hire on contract to deal with resources at the time. So the corporations will have that kind of So the existing governance arrangement, we have to continue to do two things: coordinate with other regional corporations to beef up where necessary, and secondly, continue to advocate to the two service commissions that are responsible for the 14 corporations. The SAC handles Port of Spain, San Fernando, Point Fortin, and Rima, and the Public Service Commission handles the Borough of Chaguanas and the other regional corporations. So we will continue to make that advocate to be their advocate to the commissions. And we have some measures of success, but we do recognize that when we did a sort of preliminary human resource audit in anticipation of the act, we saw that there were vacancies. Some corporations had one where they're supposed to have two, and some corporations had zero where they're supposed to have one. And all of that is what we are looking at going forward. But as I said, we're not sitting on our laurels. Presently, we are looking at innovative measures. Where there's need for assistance, we will try to get the regional corporations to work. And honorable member, before I finish this point, I alluded to the regional planning unit, which we are re-establishing. We think that that's where the gap was in terms of providing that, what you alluded to earlier, correct me if I'm wrong, the guidance and advice to the regional corporations. So we are looking to recreate that regional planning unit that existed before, that created and coordinated the municipal development plans, and also to assist in that kind of work. So that is where we are at right now.
Thank you, Chairman. If you allow me, as we go along that, can you or Mr. David tell me then, given the resourcing challenges that you alluded to, is there any effort on behalf of the corporations themselves that either on their own or guided or directed by the ministry, then to make the public aware as to the dangers of illegal structures, building in areas that they should not build, these things, those sorts of things, in some way to mitigate the impact of that sort of activity in this new environment that we're living in, where we're seeing, we experience it in Diego Martin quite regularly. We do see the rainfall and effects of rainfall in our water courses. Are we doing what we can then, given the fact that we cannot necessarily police it, quote unquote, police it? Is there anything being done to raise public awareness as to the dangers of those sorts of illegal activities?
Okay, I'll answer briefly, and Mr. David will continue because he is more on the ground with the disaster units. Mr. Honorable Member, yes, you're correct. Some corporations have run their own programs. I do recall one municipality did what you would call going around in terms of clearing drains. They had as a follow-up to the National Clean Up campaign of last year. And of course, they make announcements and they do put out flyers in people's mailbox and so forth. So some corporations have taken the initiative to do those things. But I think to get a more drill down, I'll ask Mr. David to continue because he's more on the ground.
Remember, I know you know Diego Martin just as much as I do. And when the rain falls in Diego Martin, and if there are landslides, and if there is flash flooding, I know, and I still do, the names and the addresses of individuals who will be impacted. It has been so over a number of years. From season to season, rainy season to rainy season, the same people who have erected their homes on the riverbanks, they were impacted this year, but they did not move. So that the rains will come again and they will be impacted again. And what we have done is that the Ministry of Social
Mr. David, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think the member was what he was driving on is the education, the awareness that aspect of it, what steps have you taken or what measures are you taking to use that aspect to reduce the illegality of what takes place with regards to all of the planning and the violation of regulations and those things? Are there any specific awareness program that you have implemented?
Mr. Chair, we do all the time public awareness programs in all over Trinidad. We would go to community centers on a Saturday morning, ask the community to come out. Let us talk about your situation, how you can mitigate what is happening there. Because we know very well that many of them are not going to move from where they are. So we tell them, come, let us show you how to search and rescue, how to do search and rescue, how to build sandbag walls, how to use your chainsaw. Because we know, Mr. Chairman, that they are not moving from there. They are not moving. So what we do, we tell them, these are the measures you can take. We do it constantly. We use the loudspeakers. Every single disaster management unit vehicle is now equipped with loudspeakers that they can go into every community and give information. But the folks aren't moving. And we have to now teach them to adapt. And that is what climate change is about, adaptation. So we're saying you're there, you can't move from there. How can you adapt? And that's what we're doing.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. David.
Chair, I want to thank Mr. David for that. I agree. Climate change is about adaptation. Of course, I think it's more about adapting our own behaviors to mitigate the effects of climate change, to lessen the impact on the climate, on the environment through our own behavior. There's a disaster management plan that is followed by every municipality. Of course, we are seeing year on year changes in terms of rainfall, changes in terms of the number of people in any one particular area, changes in terms of the water courses that overflowing, the changes in terms of communities that are impacted by flooding. And when I say changes, I mean that additional communities every year seem to be impacted in some way or another. Has the disaster management unit or the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government been keeping abreast of these changes, and has that been reflected in a disaster management plan that is updated regularly? And I don't know if you could speak a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. David, Mr. Chairman, we update the disaster management operation plans every 2 years. Every 2 years we update them. However, at the ministry, we have had to build capacity. And I mean really build capacity because of what is happening in the 14 municipal corporations. So that we have had to set up storehouses and with equipment and chainsaws and generators and tarpaulins and a range of this. And we have had to put them throughout the country. If you go to the act, the current act or the new act, the miscellaneous provision reform number 11 of 2022, you will see it speaks to that, developing strategic storehouses, storerooms throughout the country. We have already started that because we are seeing that the population is increasing in many areas, as the member stated, where the impact is even greater now. Moving these people, moving the individuals out of, it's not something at the DMU we can do. We cannot move individuals out of harm's way. That is the municipal DMUs cannot do that. We don't have the authority to move people out of where they live. That requires something above my mandate. Okay?
Yeah, okay, Mr. David. Thank you very much for that response. What is happening on the time is evaporating on us. We still have not engaged two of the entities who are here with us. So what I'm proposing is we leave the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government for the time being. If time allows, we'll come back. But for us to engage the Tobago House of Assembly, and the IAMovement. Okay, so in terms of the Division of Infrastructure, DIQUD, at the Tobago House of Assembly, we'd like to thank you for your responses to our questions. And it seems as though you have identified some key areas: coastal erosion, the impact of climate change on the coral and the seabed systems, and also the issue of the wetlands, in addition to other things. So maybe we can start off with you have also mentioned saltwater intrusion as part of your risk management with regards to reduction of water availability. So maybe we can start off with the coral bleaching and in terms of the reef systems. And the question is, have there been any research done to determine the extent of bleaching that is taking place and measures that can be taken to adapt? Mr. Jackson.
Mr. Chair, permit me to pass the question on to my colleague, Mrs. Adams, to respond. Thank you.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chair. In regards to coral bleaching, there has been research conducted through the Institute of Marine Affairs. They conduct research and monitor the reef system. There is data availability, but we do not have the capacity to do this for our own, through our division, but there is data available.
All right, but have the work of the IMA, has it made any, are there any projections looking down the road as to possible adaptation measures that could be taken to lessen the impact?
I'm sure that there have been adaptation measures produced through the IMA, but we have also engaged in a study in that area. Specifically, we have a study ongoing with the consultant Smith Warner International, and we have in that study we want to deal with the issues of erosion on the southwestern area of Tobago. And because the coral reef system and the mangrove system are an integral part of this, they would have engaged IMA to do some studies on the reef itself. The details of the extent of degradation and the adaptation initiatives we would be happy to provide subsequently.
Okay, but that would be dependent on Smith Warner International finishing their consultancy, would it?
Yes, we actually completed the data collection aspect of the project, and we are now entering into the stakeholder engagement phase.
Okay. Any projections as to when this consultancy would be completed? I'm asking because the committee would, we have a time frame we're working with, but if it falls within the time frame that the consultancy is completed, that would be great.
I would, yeah, by next year, 2024, the consultancy project should be completed.
Oh, okay. Okay, has there been collaboration with the Ministry of Planning and Development with regards to this consultancy that Smith Warner International is doing?
This project is solely the initiative of the Tobago House of Assembly.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you very much for your response. And in terms of the mention that you have made of the your saltwater intrusion risk because of the rising in sea levels, do you have data that actually indicate the extent of this problem or the potential risk that you are faced with regards to the saltwater intrusion and the impact it would have on your water availability, potable water availability?
Yes, I would answer the question, Chairman. There is some saltwater intrusion in some areas, particularly the well at Englishman's Bay had to be shut down because of the saltwater intrusion. So there are problems pertaining to the saltwater intrusion, and therefore it will affect our water system in this respect.
All right. Is this concentrated in a particular area of the island, or is it a general problem?
Well, if the water table continues to drop somewhat and the tidal arrangement increase, it will automatically affect other areas. But in particular, I think the Englishman's Bay well has been impacted, and therefore it had to be closed down. So we are not welcoming that, but we are preparing to ensure that those circumstances with respect to the intrusion of the saltwater be mitigated to a certain degree.
All right, but so is there that possibility then that most of your wells are going to be affected by the saltwater intrusion?
Well, no, then the wells only, that well was it's a well that is not too high above the sea level, but most of the other wells are significantly inland, and therefore they will not be impacted significantly.
Okay, Dr. Farrell, I see you have your hand up. I'll take you first and then Dr. Rupnarayan.
Thank you. Yeah, I just more of a comment than a question, but through you, Chair, just to refer the speaker to the Northeast Tobago Marine Area Management Plan that I actually quoted in one of my submissions. So just to let them know that the stakeholders looking at the conservation and climate change impacts on Tobago Main Ridge and the Northeast Tobago Marine area, which you probably know has certain protected status, would have looked at various sources of information on the impact of climate change on the reefs and then other aspects. So that is somewhere you could look. It's available through the FAO to see some of the records on climate impacts there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dr. Rupnai.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Through you, I just wanted to highlight that the saltwater intrusion in wells doesn't necessarily have to be because of coastal or climate change or sea level rise. It could also be because of over abstraction. So that's another thing to consider. And beyond that, I just wanted to highlight that the university has electromagnetic induction technology that has the capacity to assess salinity across a spatial salinity across a space and time. So it's something that we could probably contribute to if needed going forward. So just wanted to put that out there. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Mr. Jackson, you know, Doctor, based on what Dr. Ryan is saying there, you're free to liaise with or approach the University of the West Indies in that regard. So coming back to I wanted to raise the issue of the wetlands, right? Because in your response, you have spoken about the wetlands and the fact that the wetlands, some of them, I'm not sure what percentage of them is privately owned. So maybe you can indicate what is the ratio that is privately owned. And your proposal is, I think you have intimated in one of your responses, is to outright purchase of these private wetlands, or another option is to enter into a co-management arrangement with the owner, the private owner. And my question really is that even though these wetlands are private, what regulations are there in place? What developmental planning regulations are there in place that would guide, or what legislation is in place that would guide how these wetlands are managed and developed?
Thank you, Chair. As it relates to the regulations, the division doesn't really specifically deal with land regulations. That would have to pass through land management and the Office of the Chief Secretary. But the reason why this comment was made is because the coastal zone management, in collaboration with the environmental unit out of the Division of Food Production, they were trying to establish a rehabilitative initiative, but they faltered because during the processing and trying to develop the plan and to get the funding for the project, it was realized that some areas of the wetland was actually privately owned. So hence the reason why this aspect was brought up as a challenge. But regarding specifically to the regulations, we'll have to get that information for you, because it's not accessible. I don't have access to it.
Sorry. When you do get that information in your hands, could you please provide it in writing to our secretariat?
Sure, no problem.
Okay. The other question I have is that in terms of the blue economy and the climate change roadmap, reference is made to the blue economy and a climate change roadmap. Apparently, there is some work being done in partnership with the IDB. Would you like to update probably provide a bit more detail to the committee and update us as to where you all are with this exercise?
Certainly, Chair. I'll pass the question on to Ms. Adams to respond, please.
All right, as it relates to the ongoing partnership, the specific blue economy and climate change roadmap. The responsibility for this particular venture is actually under the Department of the Environment. And the information will have to be subsequently submitted once we receive it from them.
Okay, but do you have any idea when this exercise started and when it's expected to come to a close?
I don't have that information at the moment. I will supply it with the further response.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bakant, you have your hand up?
Yes, Chair. I can just speak very briefly to that because I sit on the IDB's Next Gen board, and this has been discussed a few times there. So it's just a mention. I don't know if it's being taken further, but the IDB has done, to my understanding, I don't think it's a very broad, extremely highly funded initiative. Certainly there's some value to it, but I think it's really more of a stimulus initiative because it's been something along the lines of really doing a lot of opportunities for bright ideas to be brought forward for small pools of funding, essentially. So I think that they had a blue economy sort of competition, and from that, I think maybe there were 5 to 10 selections, and there were a handful of projects out of that. And they may have scaled that up. I think the first stage was about 10,000 US per initiative, but they may have sort of amplified that a little bit. I think that they might have something in the order of 75 to 150,000 right now. But it's really to seek, I think, creative, entrepreneurial, sustainable initiatives that could be supported and scaled up. And I do know it's between the Tobago House of Assembly and the IDB.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bakan, for that clarification and the information that you have shared. If you could provide to the committee, Mr. Jackson, how extensive is the flooding and landslide landslips situation in Tobago coming out of the climate change? Could you give the committee an idea of how extensive the problem is and what are the challenges you're facing in this regard?
So, certainly, Chair. We had a quite traumatic season last year in terms of these, and we would have done some subsequent to it. We would have done some analysis and develop a matrix where we were looking at some of the key areas, and the intention was simply to move in a sort of systematic manner and identify the areas where we had the adverse types of situation and do activities and projects this year to try to mitigate some of those going forward. At this point, I'll pass to Mr. Atiba Martin to give you further information as he's on the ground in terms of those sort of works.
Thank you, Admin. Good evening, Chair. Just to expand more on what Mr. Jackson just outlined there, we ran an exercise last year with the major rainfall that we experienced in that rainy season, and we came up with roughly about 41 major projects that we have developed a listing on, and we have tried to rank them in terms of priority by going through a risk matrix, examining the severity and the impact of the events and the probability of them worsening. And based on that analysis, we have a priority that we created, and we want to look at in the next fiscal quarter and the remaining of this fiscal year. We have about 10 or so of those projects that we definitely would want to look at for the remainder of this year, and into next year we would probably look at the others going forward. So Of course, all of this is subject to the availability of funding, and many of those would form part of our draft estimates into the next fiscal year. That would obviously go to Parliament and so on.
Okay, out of the work that you're doing with the restoration of the landslips, how much of the nature-based solutions are you using?
It's difficult to say, but I take the meaning of your question to mean natural-based interventions like slope stabilization and so on. Yeah. Right. So we are definitely looking at some of those because we have found that in the past we have spent a lot of money on hard infrastructure with retaining walls that not very sustainable, is not aesthetic. And we are definitely trying to make a switch to cutting down the use of, the hard concrete infrastructure, especially as it's supposed to be a cost savings initiative. So by making the switch to the natural-based kind of interventions, we expect to realize some reduction in cost, but to say exactly what extent that we are going to pursue that, we still have to develop that as we go along. But definitely we'd be looking at making the switch to more green, natural-based measures to address some of the landslip problems that we've had over the last year around the island.
All right, so thank you very much. We have two hands up. We have Dr. Farrell and Mr. Bakan. So we go first with Dr. Farrell, and then we come to Mr. Bakan.
Good. Thank you, Chair. I think that's the correct order. So Mr. Barkat will probably tell you about some of the examples that I've seen in Tobago where they are using nature-based solutions. But one I'd just like to highlight is the fact that the main ridge reserve has been kept in place on the summit of the island and has been kept under forest cover. It is providing a nature-based solution. Internationally, that would be seen as a really high-level example of preserving a forest which manages the water flows, captures the water, and prevents some of these landslides and runoff issues in that part of the island. However, on the coast, some of the coastal areas where the forest has been removed, we may need more, restoration and interventionist solutions, which perhaps Mr. Barkant will say more about. So I just wanted to add that context because obviously the Tobago House of Assembly is doing a really good job of protecting that main ridge area and we'll hopefully see those benefits into the future.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Farrell. Mr. Bakan?
Yes, Chair, for you, thank you. And I'd just like to start by strongly affirming Dr. Farrell's contribution on the reserve. And specifically, actually, I think it's an opportunity just to make mention that in this particular project, which we've been supporting with other key partners, such as the Cropper Foundation, as well as the Energy Chamber in Trinidad and others in Guyana and Suriname. The project is called Advancing Climate Democracy in Guyana, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago. But it's really comprised of working groups of various stakeholders, teams-based NGOs, et cetera, that have looked at different things that might be championed as policy relating to climate. And I just wanted to mention briefly, because something that has come up of interest has been the recognition, of course, that Trinidad and Tobago, but Tobago has the historical Northern Reserve. I'm not sure how many of us are aware, but it's quite historical. It was the first reserve, sort of protected reserve created in the Western Hemisphere. So Tobago actually holds that historical record. I think it's in 1770 something. Private reserve, I'm not sure we call it forest reserve really. But what has come up is the interest in, and this is not new, there was actually a significant study done by Ivan Lachlan in the past on this, but the consideration of our northern range in Trinidad to be a similar reserve, and we know that, of course, it's, and as Dr. Farrell mentioned, the TH is also doing a great job at protecting at maintaining and enforcing, because enforcement is key. And we are aware of the challenges of the northern range with matters such as quarrying and that sort of thing. But certainly, I think, and nothing can be perfect, but the designation of it can greatly, obviously, improve its protection. And we have all of the same types of benefits: the biodiversity, the carbon, certainly landslides, and we know that the sort of unrestricted development exacerbates that. So I just thought I'd make mention because it certainly is a fantastic example in Northeast Tobago, and it has been thought that it could be a fantastic thing for Trinidad for all of those angles. They have said, that if you look at some other parts of Latin America, they have developed a lot, because they haven't had oil and gas, they've developed a lot of their landscape for things like farming and so on. So they've actually lost a lot of their forest. And in Trinidad, we have the unique advantage, you could say, of the oil and gas has allowed us to not need to do that, which now puts us in a position of having this wonderful resource, but do we protect it? So I just thought I'd make mention because that particular thought of Trinidad's northern range is very pertinent, I think, to our climate conversation in Trinidad and Tobago in general, and that analogy of Tobago's reserve could have served as a little bit of a parallel. But my answer to the Tobago House of Assembly's point would be a lot shorter. So, but thanks for just for hearing that, and we're also pleased to speak more to that at some point if there's any interest. But just to mention that, yes, with regards to nature-based solutions, you may hear a bit more about it, but we have been serving, certainly amongst others, but as the leads, I would say, in championing a particular solution known as the vetiver system. And while there's other species we use, and certainly all species are valuable, this particular species has been sort of studied in a very global way. It has other uses such as perfumes and handicrafts, but it's between 1 to 200 years. It's known for slope stability because the roots can grow taller than we can stand up, about 10 feet deep. And so I just wanted to make mention that we, in Trinidad, we've made a lot of headway working with the Inter-American Development Bank, as well as the Green Fund, now the Ministry of Planning and Development, as, so to speak, development agencies. But this has now led us to work also with private projects with the government, so specifically coastal protection units on the south coast, Queen Anne Beach, riverbanks in Santa Cruz with the drainage division. So just to really say, it has served as an engineering solution, both individually or combined. Sometimes you do require, you cannot evade completely the need for hard solutions. So in some cases, you might put the rock baskets or retaining walls, but you put a lesser amount and you put geotextiles and geofabrics with the vetiver. But all of this is cost savings measures. And I wanted to mention for the THA that, in fact, we were part of a project that was in Tobago. It's sort of wrapping up soon. But just to make mention that there's actually some trained persons and communities in Northeast Tobago that now have access to these plants through their nurseries, and trained individuals in the communities that are capable of mobilizing and doing this type of work. So the point is that the resources are over there now to actually implement and include this within your projects if needed. The reality is sometimes you do require a bit of the engineering look and sort of the design and see how it's done and that sort of thing. But there is a local persons and resources there that can be used if you wish to consider that in your programs. There's one little caveat or thing I'll just mention, it's worth keeping in mind for certain sites, is it requires very good sunlight to grow. So that's all sites that are denuded and that sort of thing, but it does not work as well in forest cover. And I do know that parts of the landslip area can be forested. So you can just keep that in mind with regards to certain sites.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bakan, for that, all that information. I'm sure that the members of DIQUD were listening very carefully to what you were saying there. Now, before we get a bit more into the IAMovement, there's just one question again I would like to ask the THE, in that based on a response to us, to one of our questions, in terms of overall climate change management in Tobago, I think you were identifying one or two options in that you were intimating that a position has to be created. Now, by saying a position has to be created, it means probably an individual has to be appointed to look at the whole overall coordination of climate change or management. Or another suggestion that you made in your response was in the job descriptions of individuals, you include a climate change element for the respective individuals with responsibilities, so that hopefully that would address some aspects of the climate change. But Mr. Jackson, my question to you is that really sufficient? Because based on what the committee has looked at your responses, I mean, you're dealing with coastal erosion, you're dealing with issues with your wetlands, you're dealing with issues with coral bleaching, landslips, flooding, all due to the climate change. And whether, consideration is being given, to something a bit more intense in terms of even possibly a separate division within the House of Assembly to totally address climate change. Just to get your views on that, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you are correct. What is happening now? Before, environment was under the Division of Infrastructure. Now the environmental unit was moved to the Division of Food Security and the Environment. And you are correct in what you are saying, because we have the coastal zone management unit by us. We are now staff. I think we had 3 persons a couple of years ago. We now have 1 person. So there's a lot of capacity building and more staffing structure that need to be put in place going forward to address this issue in the manner that it should be addressed. We need to also look at the policies and also the legislation to support it, because this thing is not just staffing. There are a lot of other elements that come together for you to make this thing successful. So the answer to your question is yes, there's a much more that we need to be looking at going forward. And one thing I will stress also is the partnerships, because we would have heard some interesting and very correct thing from the University of West Indies, and we will looking forward to liaising with entities such as the UE in terms of some of these activities. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, we're having just a little problem here with one of the mics, particularly mine, the one that I'm using. But thank you very much, Mr. Jackson. And we want to close off at 5 o'clock. So I would just like to shift the rest of the discussion to the IAMovement, and Member De Nobrega has some questions that he will.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I want to tell you I had some questions on the nature-based solutions, but Mr. Barker gave such a comprehensive answer to the THA that I'm not too sure I really have that much more to ask about it. I suppose, so maybe I should start off by saying that through these engagements, we've spoken about mitigating the effects of climate change, and we've really talked about it at a very high level. So, Mr. Barker, you and your organization do quite a lot of community work, quite a lot of work in rural communities. I do know, because your organization is based in Diego Martin as well, so I do know that you do work in the wider Diego Martin area. I suppose the first question I really want to ask is, at the community level, are people truly aware of climate change, the effects of climate change, the impact that their behavior is having on it, what they can do? Is that awareness there, and what more can be done to improve that awareness and to, I suppose, to drive behavioral change?
Through you, Chair, and thank you, through you, Chair, and thank you very much, Member De Nobrega, for that. Yeah, I would have to, of course, speak anecdotally, because, we engage with a lot of community members We've done some studies, and actually we have, as was earlier introduced, he introduced himself earlier, but our monitoring and evaluation specialist is on the line, so he might be able to offer some further remarks with regards to the broad knowledge. And there was actually an interesting booklet that was, I think, funded by the Ministry of Planning and Development, and a very nice educational booklet called Islands Like Us. I don't know if any of my team members have, they can even show it quickly, because it was funded by the Ministry of Planning and Development, a fantastic little publication. But for some, you know how it is, it ended there. And we managed to seek the funding to print it, and then we're seeking the distribution mechanisms. But it's the type of thing that could be a coffee table booklet for everyone. But the reason I say that is I think that it included a study on Independence Square of 200 persons that were questioned about this specific question, you know, their knowledge of climate change, their interest, whether they think the government is doing enough, and so on. So if you're interested, we may be able to actually invite someone from our team to just speak to a few of the results from there, because again, this is a 200 sample set from the Independence Square. But just speaking again anecdotally from the sort of conversations, you know, I would really have to say broadly yes, you know, especially with farmers. We do a lot of work in farming as well, and they speak very categorically to the change in weather. I mean, farmers have to be so knowledgeable of weather patterns, consistency, etc. And while we who don't farm might sort of have our views, you know, we don't feel it as much. And therefore, hearing it from their mouths is quite affirming. And it actually suggests, you know, as I mentioned, those anecdotes, but it might be interesting to do that as an actual full sample set of Barramin, for example, or some other farming community. And then, you know, of course, there are persons who would be just seeing the effects, whether it's land slippage, erosion in their communities, and so on. They could also speak to the more extreme weather. Santa Cruz is a place that is a particular community, Rampassoon Trace, we worked in, and it was on the news quite a bit because the whole community was literally slipping down. And I do think, you know, it's in fairly recent times and that kind of thing, you know. So there is the knowledge there, and maybe I would, to complete that question, maybe I can invite one of my team members to just, there's about 8 or 9 sort of little snippets of information, but maybe just choose 2 or 3 from the back of that booklet if anybody's able to, that speak to those questions that were asked to the public about, 1, I think, are you aware of climate change? 2, do you think government's doing enough? That kind of thing. Because the results were actually quite, I would say, positive from the standpoint of the community, the society's interest in that. Is anybody able to do that? And if not, you can take your time and come back later if you want to pick the questions out or the points. Kathleen or Kevin, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. So one of the questions, as Jonathan said, the sample size of approximately 200%. So one of the questions were, you know, if you are aware of the negative impacts of climate change in Trinidad and Tobago, and the results was 83% said yes. With regards to if climate change affects you, 92% confirmed that it does. And if we believe that the government is doing enough, 91% said no. So that was just some figures just pulling quickly from the booklet. There's quite a bit more. I know Casey would have shared the link to the digital booklet on the Zoom chat as well.
And maybe, Kev, what you can do as well is just show quickly the booklet, because it's really, and actually, no, I will answer. I forgot, Member Denobriga, one thing you asked as well with regards to increasing awareness. So, Kevin, I think you have the full screen, so if you're able to pull it up, or Kathleen, I don't know. But the point is, something to highlight here again, this was actually funded by the Ministry of Planning and Development. But if you flip through that booklet, it is the bite-sizedness, the imagery, the digestibility. Kevin, you don't have a copy you can show, because you have full screen.
I'm showing it now.
Okay, Kathleen is just doing a bit of a funny thing with your background.
With my background.
But anyway, you know, we're happy to share some of these, but the point is, we, through our own mechanisms, try to create some distribution programs for this. And certainly we always stand available to partner with any public entities that might be interested in doing distribution. And a last thing, you know, I would just mention on that is, true, and you know, you've seen a little bit of this. Some persons here might be familiar with the Rethinking Energy video series, which IAMovement did in collaboration with the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago and the Energy Chamber. But that series, because it spoke to very, very high level information on energy, it was critical for us to get it right in terms of the content. So it was very carefully scripted, working with National Gas and the Energy Chamber. but ultimately it was made digestible to people and put into infographic form. And I just wanted to mention briefly, because this is nice and actually brings in a bit of our, let's call it, we have other ministries and digital transformation in particular. We have all these digital transformations efforts, but there's another fantastic initiative which is supported by the Inter-American Development Bank, being championed by the University of Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm certain there's some links to certain ministries, but it is focused on animation, but it is led by a certain specialist in animation. And what she's been doing is creating this ecosystem that has actually now wound up engaging. I'm talking about the sort of story she brings is that, university, I think that the global industry for animation stands at some huge number, about 800 billion, so US. So I think she's actually trying to grow the ecosystem from the standpoint of the economy and the fact that we, working remotely or wherever, can produce these videos. But it has come up quite a lot in our discussions with the IDB and so on, is just the power of animation in communication, and therefore the power of these short animated videos. And I'm just making mention because there's this project funded by the IDB called, Kathleen, maybe you could just, I don't know why it's still on your screen, that's fine. Just on my side, I'm seeing you, but that's okay. I was just inside of the chair, but that's just, I think my Zoom is doing something, But I'm just mentioning that, that basically it's funded by the IDB as they do with some of these innovation projects. And it's called, I think, the Tap Factory. And I'm sharing it for the knowledge of everyone because, it's an impact-focused project, and therefore they sort of stand ready, sort of with UTT actually providing interns and that kind of thing to create animation-style content. And we are working with them, but, I just wanted to make that a little plug for the value of animation. If we think about certain information we consider valuable that might need to be carefully thought about in the background by professionals and scripted and whatnot, but then making it available to the public, obviously through all mechanisms, social media, television, and that sort of thing.
Chairman, I know we are getting close to time. Mr. Barker, you had made reference to the work that you were doing at Queen Anne Beach. You spoke about your NSP, the nature-based solutions. You specifically spoke about vetiver grass, and for anybody who has served at any level where you are in areas where there's flooding, there is land slippage, at the local government level, people speak about vetiver grass, but I'm wondering what other solutions, because we know Ministry of Works is utilizing vetiver grass, and I believe in conjunction with geotextiles, and I think you also mentioned it as well, sort of those gabion baskets. What are the solutions practical? What other solutions are being used now outside of vetiver grass as a nature-based solution? And besides the ones that are being utilized now, which other solutions are practical, in particular for riverbank erosion?
Through you, Chair, and thank you, Member Inaugurator. Yes, so vetiver, I've even asked one of my colleagues if they happen to have a laminate picture they can show quickly, just because we always say a picture speaks 1,000 words, and seeing that root system really shows what it is. If we can do that, it would be beneficial to everyone. But that's why we began working with that closely. I'll also, make a mention too, we had a Grow Your Roots competition that was completed at the end of last year, and the judging was with the mayor of Port of Spain on his balcony, and we were even blown away because within 1 year, and we'll have these pictures to show soon, but the specimen of roots was 8 feet tall, right? So this is a simple grass, but bamboo has been something I'm not advocating for here. It's become a bit of a problem. It's invasive. I think that they've actually put a sort of a price on each bamboo shoot that you can return and that sort of thing and so on. But it's been something that is promoted and used a lot by forestry. And I just want to actually mention that it's a bit of a mistake. It would work well in certain environments on the flat because the root system is shallower, but it's a very tall, heavy species. So we see cases where this is on slopes next to roads. But then when you have the heavy rains, that wind pushing the whole bamboo patch results in a big slip, actually. So it's actually not effective for the stabilization. Whereas the vetiver, the roots being very deep, holy land, and then there's no weight on it, therefore it helps. But there's an interesting case I want to mention briefly. This is actually in Perseverance. So Perseverance is a community, and I know there's a lot of cases like this, but Perseverance is a community that has faced a lot of flooding and sedimentation, and we see the videos every year they were sending and that sort of thing. And big feet of sediments after, and that was caused by the upstream community. Well, there's a forest buffer, but nonetheless, Parliament is above with however much 100 feet of slope. When you get up into Parliament and see the erosion, these gullies are big. What I mean to say is they are feet deep and feet wide, 10 feet deep, and some 5 to 10 feet deep, and that sort of thing. So rehabilitating them takes effort, and we realized vetiver couldn't do it on its own. So we did vetiver on some of just created these terraces, and if you see that image soon, you'll see why. But there's something called live staking, using things like Gliricidia, even plum trees. You stick a plum tree, stick in the ground, you know it grows, right? And you get a tree out of that. But the point is, by using these things, you create what's called check dams, which is like a grid in the gullies, and that actually creates a living structure, because the dam immediately captures debris, but then it grows into a living tree structure and continues to do that. And I have to say, within 1 year, we received feedback from the community asking us, is it possible this could be working already? And we felt a little hesitant to say yes, because it's so early. But now we think we can really conclusively say, I do not think I know, because the complaints are way less and that sort of thing. But the point is, we can conclusively say that this has worked. This check dam and vetiver combination, where the community downstream has significantly less flooding, sedimentation, and all of that. And this has been done with community members in Parliament in this particular case. So the programs that we've been kind of doing with the government and so on, this is the Green Fund and so on, and the Inter-American Development Bank. These are these landscapes you don't work on without communities. I mean to say, they have to be involved, and it's their land, and so they get trained in the whole mechanisms, but they're actually helped to do the planting. Because they are not aware of it at the time, we come with quote unquote some employment benefits. They actually would earn something stipends wise, taking care of it, etc. And gradually they see the value and they support it. So it takes that mechanism and time, but we actually see this as a mechanism that can both create what we call very valuable green employment for communities across the landscapes of Trinidad and Tobago, while actually doing the solutions, So it's something that is quite fitting, we think, even with the likes of our programs that are focused on employment, whether it's what we call the Unemployment Relief Program and CPEP and that kind of thing. And I want to make a last little mention on that, just because it, just some food for thought. Even though, Simon, there is a bigger project that if I have the time, I will speak to, which is the whole waste capture, organic waste and quarry rehabilitation. But just in mentioning Unemployment Relief Program and CPEP, I just think it is really worth mentioning. In Dominica, they have the same programs taking care of the roads. And the roads in Dominica, if you've been are beautiful, where they have croutons, these sort of flower plants, they're ready leaves all over. But what I find very interesting is I don't know, it's the same sort of taking care of the roadsides, which we need. We require these programs. Our roads, if not, they'll be left. We've seen it in COVID a bit, will be totally overgrown. But in Dominica, instead of being called the Unemployment Relief Program, it's called National Employment Program. And it seems small, but we just think that is tremendous from the standpoint of this is vital employment and vital services. So, it's a bit more empowering, we think, to call it National Employment Program. And as a result of that, there's even been a spin-off where another name for that program in Dominica is called Beautification Program, because they take care of the roads and even have competitions every year and that sort of thing with communities. So just a bit of a different slant, but recognizing these persons are doing effectively planting activities, maintenance activities, nature-based solutions, and that there is opportunity for the growth of our programs in that area, So I'll end there. If there is time, I may speak briefly just to the sort of organic waste and quarries as another approach, but I do recognize that time is running out. So
we may have to leave that one for another time. Probably
sure.
Another forum that presents itself, or one that the committee could actually create.
Sure.
We have Dr. O'Brien and Dr. Farrell with their hands up. So we'll take their inputs first, and then I just have one or two comments for the IAMovement, and then we'll look to wrap up. So, Dr. O'Brien.
I just wanted to add, thanks, Chair, that based on awareness and response to the question as well, that in developing that 1UE climate change program, we would have done a survey across the entire region, which encompassed maybe about, I think, 800 persons, about 200 of which was from Trinidad. And there's quite a bit of awareness in terms of people understanding the impacts of climate change, etc. I think 90-something% indicated that. And also to highlight from that survey, they thought that the area that should be most focused on in terms of climate adaptation should really be climate and agriculture. And this involves both communities as well as developmental agencies and state agencies as well. In addition to that, the one last point I want to make based on what Mr. Barker was saying is that the vetiver grass, there's a whole host of other nature-based solutions, and we would have worked with them as well. He didn't mention that part in assessing the effects of it quantitatively in terms of its ability to remove moisture as well as stability, support stability, as well as the removal of heavy metals and bioregulation as well. So there's evidence to support that these things work. We just have to understand how to do it properly. Thanks, Chair. Over to Dr. Farrell.
Dr. Farrell. Yeah, Dr. Farrell, did I get the order correct this time?
Yes, I think so. Thank you. Yeah, through you, Chair, I just wanted to add one more to the list in answer to the members' questions about nature-based solutions, just to make it clear that, you know, the number one thing is still to try and maintain trees. So if you have slopes of a certain aspect, maintaining the tree cover is still the best way to prevent the landslips. So where that is in place, preventing fires from running through those areas can be considered, you know, a nature-based solution to prevent slippage. So fire traces and fire management of forested areas on slopes should be a high priority for a solution for landslips as well.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Farrell. I just want to assure Mr. Barker that the committee, we do have your nature-based solutions for climate adaptation, your policy position paper 1 that you submitted to the committee. So time doesn't permit us to go into much details about it, but definitely your work there is recognized. The committee is going through it very carefully, and it will be incorporated in the findings of our report when the report is being finalized. I know you all did mention that you would like to see nature-based solutions become part of policy and possibly legislation. I think a lot of the members of the committee, I as well share that view. And you did take the effort to review the National Environmental Policy, the National Environment Policy of 2018, where you did indicate, you know, in specific sections where first preference should be given to nature-based solutions. So the committee has noted those things. But I would allow a little more time because I just want to bring to the public's attention as well as all the entities who are here, is that you have also done a policy paper on agriculture, which you have submitted to the committee. And you have stated that there is a lack of effective policies that address impact of climate change on agriculture for mainstreaming, adaptation, and mitigation needs. So, Mr. Barker, could you just probably briefly just elaborate on that a bit for us before we close out?
Sure, Chair. Thank you. I'll have to speak here just briefly on behalf of our colleagues at the Cropper Foundation, because I just want to make mention, the Cropper Foundation, I think, have been more intimately close with the Joint Select Committee process with some other contributions. So they led on the development of these papers where they've been working closely with us through this project called Advancing Climate Democracy in Guyana, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago. So they are the ones that have actually done a bit more work on the agricultural side. They've led a project, a significant one. It was called MAPS. I can't remember exactly what it means, but it was supported by the Inter-American Development Bank, a fairly sizable project engaging 500 farmers and all sorts of research. So we can perhaps ask also that they can provide some comment via email and that sort of thing. But I will make just a brief mention because we are working in agriculture ourselves, and so some of our things may have fallen in there. And so, Chair, this will actually allow just a brief mention of the other project work that I was speaking about with regards to the use of organic material. And so our landfills are at a stage where it's well known, many of them are at capacity, and the numbers are somewhere around 700,000 tons of waste per year. And I do believe that 40% or more is categorized as organic waste, which it is known actually serves as a fuel for landfill fires. And of course, there's just stress on the landfill. And also as it pertains to climate change, is also a known contributor and a strong contributor of methane, which is, I think, 20-something times more powerful than carbon dioxide. So there's various negative effects of the organic waste going to the landfills. I'm sure we're all familiar with the pictures we see, or not pictures, sorry, just driving on the highway and seeing bags of leaves that are left to go to the landfills. If we can think just for a second about, let's call it how, I have to say nonsensical that is, or just not sensical from the standpoint of organic matter being put into plastic to send to a landfill to decompose in a setting that creates the methane when this organic matter has other value. So I just wanted to make mention that, Chair, there's been fantastic efforts, not just amongst ourselves, although we are part of it. This is actually a consortium of partners that is now seeking to work with SWIMCOL, as well as Ministry of Rural Development and that sort of thing. So I'm very happy to see them on the line. But basically looking at the organic waste, instead of going to landfills, this is being a resource that could be used instead. And where this organic waste is being transferred to, this is not conceptual, this is right now. The doors are open and we're actually trying to increase the quantities. But the organic waste that can be captured for high-level composting at industrial scale facilities in St. Augustine and right out there just outside of Port of Spain, with certain private partners such as Thompson's and Tucana and that sort of thing. And basically this organic waste, instead of going to landfills, is converted to compost and then can be used in farming as a fertilizer substitute. This of course benefits economy as well when fertilizers are a high price, but certainly, Chair, that particular approach to farming is what is considered more climate smart, more carbon friendly, more carbon sequestering, and also reduces the emissions and so on at landfills. So just kind of highlighting that as a win-win, and thankfully there is a lot of stakeholders that are all seeing the win-wins, and we're very grateful to be working with them. But I think that that is an example too of policy that may be considered that sort of trickles into waste area and waste management, but is certainly in the area of climate change. And again, we're pleased to provide more information on this if you all would like.
Yeah, we'll welcome that very much, Mr. Vaca. Thank you. Yes, we're out of time. And so I would like to bring this inquiry to an end. Now, before I do so, I would just like to invite brief closing comments or brief closing remarks from the respective entities and the chief official who is here present. So we go to Mrs. Penelope Bradshaw-Niles. Madam Permanent Secretary, are you still with us?
I am still here. Thank you very much again for the invitation. The discussion here is certainly critical and very enlightening as well, you know, as we get to see all the different aspects. So I just want to give again the commitment of the Ministry of Energy to continue its work towards mitigating the effects of climate change, and to let you know, I know we didn't speak a lot about it, but we are doing quite a lot in terms of the carbon capture. And just to mention that, for example, we are working with the University of the West Indies and the University of Trinidad and Tobago in terms of developing a carbon storage atlas. which is in effect looking at the infrastructure we have where we produce oil and gas, and therefore we would now have, because the oil and gas has been produced, we have space, so to speak, that we can store carbon in it. And so quite a lot of work has been done. We have some initial figures for some of the areas, and that's a very important part of what we are doing, along with methane reduction. So there's quite a lot that we didn't discuss here today that the ministry has been working with the state enterprises, Heritage and NGC, and also the stakeholders in the energy sector in terms of moving, and the universities in terms of moving that forward. So thank you very much again for the invitation, and we give our commitment to continue to work for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Permanent Secretary. I'd just like Mr. Mitchell, if he can give his closing remarks.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, we were grateful to participate in this session. The ministry, as I alluded to earlier, is fully committed to support the government's efforts in climate change and climate change adaptation. And we do have other programs on the rural development side that we are working on. And we were glad to be here with our colleagues from the Ministry of Energy and from the Tobago House of Assembly. And we look forward into working with our colleague ministries in dealing with the climate change issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mitchell. I'd just like to ask Mr. Jackson of the DIQD of the THA for his closing remarks.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I for one, on behalf of the division, would like to express our thanks and gratitude to the committee for convening this session. It was very informative, and I welcome the contribution of all the members and the entities gathered here. In future, we look forward to partnering more with the UE and IAM in terms of some of these solutions. We are quite interested in a lot of these things, and we really want to partner more, and we look forward to further dialogue, and you as Mr. Chairman and your members facilitating this dialogue to the benefit of Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Jackson. And I'll ask Mr. Barker of the IAMovement to for his closing remarks.
Thank you, Chairman and members, once again for having IAMovement here. It has definitely been a pleasure to be part of this and to see what it's really entails with regards to trying to make contributions to important policy areas of Trinidad and Tobago. Also to listen to colleagues across all of the organizations. So thank you very much once again for having us. And just in closing, to mention if there's any of our projects and work that you're interested in knowing more in, please feel free to reach out. And Chair, one last thing I'll mention, I know you are familiar with this project, but the same Advancing Climate Democracy, which is funded by the UN Democracy Fund, there are certain outcomes still to be produced by some working groups on what is sort of seen as key action areas, and we'd be happy for the opportunity to forward that information if it fits within the time frame of the committee when that's ready. But other than that, thank you very, very much, and happy to be in further contact as required.
Yeah, we'll welcome the information, Mr. Barker. Thank you. Dr. Ruknarai, closing remarks.
Thanks very much, Chair. Well, as always, the UE is very happy to have been here and to hear the perspectives of all the agencies present today. And I was particularly pleased, and I think my colleagues were as well, to hear about the nature-based solutions. This is something we have spoken about many times in different iterations of this same JSC. And I'm very happy to hear that it's taking the forefront through the IAMovement as well as some of the other agencies. We stand ready to continue to support in whatever area required. And again, it's been a pleasure, and we look forward to the future meetings. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, so I would like to thank all the representatives who are here, who made the time to give to this committee and who have responded to our questions in a very direct way. And all the entities who appeared in the previous 3 public hearings we have had. But I think I would just like to offer our special appreciation, thanks to the University of the West Indies. They have been part of all the 4 public hearings, and I think their contributions will be very beneficial to the work of the committee. So thanks once again to everyone. I would like to thank the viewing and listening audience, and of course, to thank our committee members and the Secretariat, the Parliament staff, for their support. You know, without the work of the Secretariat, the committee just would fall flat. And you know, 4 public hearings consecutively, all of the inquiry proposals, all of the follow-up questions, the preparation of the issue papers is a tremendous amount of work that is done by the Secretariat. And on behalf of the committee, all the members of the committee, we would like to extend our appreciation to you all. And I would like to declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you. That has been a long one.